When I was 17 and finishing my final year of high school, there was a weekend near the end of the school year when my parents decided to go out of town. I immediately saw it as the perfect chance to throw an end-of-year party. I went to the store and bought 3 huge bags of red Solo cups along with a bag of ping pong balls. I also paid my older brother, who was 21, to buy a bunch of beer and liquor for me. One advantage of my house was its location. It sat in a quiet cul-de-sac, and behind the backyard there was a large area of land used for water collection. Because of that, the odds of getting a noise complaint were pretty low. My brother invited around 10 of his own friends, and people started arriving around 9 that night. I basically made it an open invite for most of the people in my grade. At the height of the party, there were probably 60 to 70 kids packed into my house. It was way crazier than I ever expected. Eventually, I noticed people I did not even recognize walking through my front door. That was when I decided I had to take control. I started locking the door to keep random people from coming in. Every time someone stepped outside, I would lock it again. Later on, when there were about 20 kids still hanging around, my close friend Peter asked me about a guy who had gone upstairs. I asked him what he meant, and he told me he had just seen some random guy heading up the stairs about a minute earlier. I had planned to keep the upstairs off limits since the only rooms up there were bedrooms. I rushed upstairs and checked every room, but all the lights were off and everything looked empty. I checked my own room last, and it also seemed empty. I went back downstairs to tell Peter, but he insisted with 100% certainty that someone was still up there. So I went back upstairs with him, and we searched again. We looked under every bed and inside every closet, but whoever Peter thought he saw never showed up. After that, we went back downstairs. I figured he had just been drinking too much and could not really be trusted at that point. Peter was one of the few people I planned to let sleep over. He actually passed out on the couch before everyone else even left. By the time the last guests headed home, it was probably around 2 in the morning. My brother was already asleep in his room upstairs, while Peter and my other friend John were crashed on the couches downstairs. I went upstairs to use the bathroom, completely exhausted, but still proud of how the party turned out. As I brushed my teeth and stared at myself in the mirror, my vision a little blurry from all the alcohol, I thought I heard something coming from above me. I turned off my electric toothbrush and stood there listening for a long time, but everything went quiet. I finished up and walked into my bedroom. Just before I could collapse into bed, I heard it again. A heavy thump echoed from the ceiling above me. I went over to my brother's bedroom door, but no matter how many times I knocked, he never came out. That was when it suddenly crossed my mind to check the attic. For some reason, it had taken me that long to even think of it. I grabbed the hook that pulls the attic stairs down from the ceiling. I had never actually gone up there before. As I climbed into the attic and stepped into the darkness, I reached around above the floor, trying to find some kind of light switch. My hand brushed against the hanging string, and I pulled it. A single weak light flickered on. The area in the middle of the attic near the opening was lit well enough, but the outer edges along the walls were completely dark. Even so, I could feel that I was not alone up there. I called out and asked if anyone was in there. My heart raced when a box near one corner suddenly tipped over, revealing someone crouched behind another stack of boxes. It did not look like a kid at all. It looked like a grown man. At the exact same moment, I heard the sound of a plastic bag being moved in another corner of the attic behind me. I immediately jumped down the ladder and slammed the attic door shut. I ran downstairs to my 2 friends and tried to explain what I had just seen. It took a moment to wake them up enough for them to understand what I was yelling about. Peter immediately told me to call the police, and I did. I think I needed someone else to confirm that calling the cops was the right move before I actually made the call. After that, the 3 of us went back upstairs and started banging on my brother's door again. but he still did not respond. At that point, I was worried that something bad might have happened to him. When we heard police sirens outside, we ran downstairs, feeling a huge sense of relief. 2 officers came inside and asked where the attic entrance was. I led them upstairs and opened the attic door for them. They went to work right away. They climbed up with flashlights in one hand and their guns ready in the other. We were told to stay in the living room. Less than 2 minutes later, the officers came back down with 2 men who looked to be in their 30s or 40s. They were filthy and intimidating, clearly dangerous looking, most likely homeless and possibly unstable. They stared at us as they walked by. Shortly after that, my brother finally came out of his room and immediately threw up. When I explained everything that had happened, he told us he had slept through all of the knocking and yelling at his door. Since my brother was 21, he was able to act as the responsible adult and speak with the police. Because of that, we managed to keep the entire incident hidden from our parents. I used to attend the University of Idaho before I eventually transferred to another school. During my sophomore year, I went to a lot of fraternity parties. There was one frat party in particular that completely changed how I see college parties. I am going to leave the name of the fraternity out of this story, but one of the smaller frats on campus was hosting an open party. Girls got in for free, while guys had to pay $20 at the door, so all of us paid the cover charge. When we made it inside, there were definitely a lot of people there, but the overall atmosphere felt dirty and unsettling. There were way more guys than girls, and the house was unbearably hot. I noticed a couple of guys heading toward a back room, so I decided to follow and see what was going on back there. After passing through a door into a much quieter part of the house, I watched those same 2 guys step outside. I figured I would follow them and see what the party looked like in the backyard. When I opened the back door and looked out, I saw the 2 of them standing near a fire pit. There was no one else outside at all. They turned to look at me when they heard the door open, and before I could turn around and head back inside, they waved for me to come over. I felt uncomfortable, and I knew I probably should have ignored them and gone back inside, but I felt pressured and ended up walking toward them. They told me to sit down on one of the logs arranged around the fire pit, and I did. Then they sat down on 2 separate logs and lit cigarettes. The 2 of them just sat there silently, smoking and staring in my direction. They did not say anything or even offer me a cigarette. Since they were the ones who called me over, I tried to make conversation and asked if they were members of the fraternity. One of them slowly shook his head no, and that was the end of it. I then asked if they knew anyone at the party. This time, I did not even get a response. Instead, they looked at each other and then both turned their attention back to me. Once they were staring at me, they would not look away, and I started to feel more and more uneasy. Finally, one of them spoke in a slow, flat voice and said, "That is a nice watch." I glanced down at the cheap $30 Timex on my wrist. It was not a nice watch at all, but maybe to him it seemed valuable. That same guy stood up, and as he started walking toward me, he said, "Give me your watch." The other guy stood up too and moved behind me like they were trying to box me in. I hurriedly took the watch off, saying, "Yeah, sure, no problem." Once it was off, I stood up and handed it to him, but standing up was really just a way to get myself ready to run for the door. I heard a quick flick and a slicing sound behind me. I immediately connected it to the sound of a knife being opened. The guy behind me told me to take off my shirt, and that was the moment I knew I had to run. It took me maybe 3 seconds to reach the back door. I have no idea how far they followed me, or if they followed me at all, but I made it back inside the house. I pushed my way to the front area where the party was still going and found my 2 friends. I told them we had to leave right now, and that I would explain later. People were staring at me since I was clearly causing a scene while rushing my friends out. After a moment, they finally listened and we left through the front door. The campus was about half a mile away, so we walked back. While we were heading back, I turned around at one point and noticed two people walking in our direction. I stopped and kept watching them. The two figures stepped under a streetlight. It was the same two men from the backyard. I told my friends to run, and they did not hesitate. We ran all the way back to campus and straight to our dorms. Later on, I told the president of that specific fraternity about what had happened. He assured me that those two men were not connected to the frat. Even so, I never went to another party hosted by that fraternity, and I definitely slowed down on partying for a long time after that. I used to spend a lot of time on Tinder, mostly on weekends when I had nothing going on and hoped to meet someone new. One Friday night, my friends Steve, Raj, and I were hanging out in my room with nothing to do. I ended up matching with a girl on Tinder, and based on her pictures and bio, she seemed pretty cool. She messaged me first and said there was a party and told me to come through. I asked her for the details, like which town it was in, what time it started, and the address. She sent me the address of a house in a nearby town. It was not far at all. I copied and pasted the address into my Maps app, and it said the drive would only take 10 minutes. I asked her for her number so we could text instead, and she gave it to me right away. We texted back and forth for a bit, and the conversation ended with me telling her that we were on our way. My friends were down to go, so I figured there was no reason not to. It definitely sounded better than just sitting around in my room. I put on a pair of jeans and a button-up shirt, while my friends stayed dressed the way they already were. We ordered an Uber to take us to the house. When we arrived, the house looked pretty small, and most of the houses on that street were also small, so right away we were thinking it was probably a ghetto-type party. I texted the girl again, and she told us to come inside. As we walked up to the stoop, we could hear loud music playing inside, which was at least somewhat reassuring. The Uber pulled away as we stepped up to the door. The girl said again to just come in, so I opened the door and we let ourselves inside. We walked into the living room, and every room connected to it appeared to be lit up. The music sounded like it was coming from another part of the house, but despite that, the living room itself was completely empty. There was no one around at all, except for a single punk-looking guy in his 20s sitting in a chair in the kitchen. I texted the girl again and told her we were inside. She replied, then told us to come downstairs. I asked her where the downstairs was, and she said it was the door directly in front of the front door. My friends were laughing and saying the whole situation felt extremely suspicious, and that maybe we should just leave. I opened the door that was directly in front of me, and sure enough, it led down into a basement. A blue light filled the entire space below. The music was definitely coming from down there. I started walking down the stairs slowly. Raj followed right behind me, but for some reason, Steve stayed at the very top step. He yelled down asking me to tell him what was down there. It was hard to hear him clearly because the music was incredibly loud. I made it far enough down the staircase that I could finally see into the basement. Instead of a room full of people dancing, I saw a row of men standing against a wall, staring straight up at me. Some of them were wearing durags, one had a backward cap on, and most of them appeared to be minorities. They were pressed up against the wall farthest from the stairs, tucked into what looked like a blind spot. All I could think was that this had to be some kind of setup. Suddenly, I heard a disturbance coming from upstairs, and I saw Steve getting into some kind of argument with the guy who had been sitting in the kitchen. I shoved Raj and told him to hurry the hell back up the stairs. When we reached Steve, that same guy was trying to block us from leaving. He started yelling something in Spanish down toward the basement, and I saw 4 or 5 men sprinting toward the stairs. It was easily the most terrifying moment of my life. We managed to overpower the single guy holding us back and forced our way out of the house, with maybe only 2 seconds to spare. Thankfully, we were all in decent shape and ran as fast and as far away as possible. After sprinting at full speed for several minutes, we finally had to stop and catch our breath. I was the one who called the police and told them to go check that house immediately. After that, we ordered an Uber back to my place and stayed there for the rest of the night. I never found out what the police discovered when they checked the house. I did not really think that far ahead when I made that call. All I know now is that if something feels suspicious online, you should stay far away from it. You never truly know who you are meeting or what kind of situation you might be walking into.